Hello and welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure to find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review the show. I'm your host, Wim Lou. I'm joined by co-host Blake Murphy, who has made it back to studio in the nick of time. Dan Tolman, stop talking to your coworkers 1 minute before going to air, please.
I got bad news for you as well because. I mean, it's MLK Day, obviously, so there are a lot of sports going on. The 905 are in a one-possession game with 11 seconds left right now, so apologies. I may be a little distracted these first few seconds.
That's why you were not on air. This man is watching if the 905 can pull out against the Birmingham Squadron.
Usually the Birmingham Squadron, but as part of MLK Day today, the Birmingham Black Barons, which is cool. They've integrated a lot of MLK Day stuff into that game. The Black Barons are at the free throw line right now, looking to steal this one. Big, you'll be shocked to learn it's another big Marquise Noel game.
Yeah, how's he doing? How big is this game?
I mean, good enough.
This is not how we plan to start the show, but we can start here, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, we got to pump him up because potential friend of the show later this week. But
potential friend of the show.
Yeah, 20-11 right now. We'll see how they close out.
Actual friend of the show, Josh Hart, a prince of Sportsnet 590, The Fan, is actually just sitting off to the camera. And sitting back and just enjoying it. So, yeah, man, enjoy your day off.
He almost had to come on air when
No, I told him. I was like, yo, Blake doesn't come in here in the next 10 seconds. I'm going to do the throw back to the Yahoo days.
Okay, so obviously we didn't intend to start with Raptors 905. We also probably didn't intend to start with hockey. But the big news from the weekend is that you went to a Leaf game. You got to take your dad to the Leaf game yesterday. Fill us in. How was it, man?
Oh, like I said, the backstory here is my dad has been a Leafs fan since coming to Canada in 2000, and but he's never been to a Leafs game, and this is I think not too surprising considering Leafs games are a little bit inaccessible. But after telling the story on air, through the hockey assist that Alex was able to provide, was able to get access to the game. I would totally love to shout out the person who actually helped make this happen. But this person actually specifically requested not to. But in any case, I've already expressed my gratitude in person. But yeah, that person actually took us through a tour before the game. So walked through a bunch of the private boxes. By the way, do you know they're like, you have to pay $70K to get unlimited access to the private, some of the private sections for both Leafs and
I don't know if you've
games, but goddamn,
I don't know if you've seen or met me, but I do not spend much time in those private booth sections. All I know is that when I walk by on the way to our media gondola, there's always all sorts of food, and I just wonder, if a slice of cake went missing off those carts, would they really notice?
That's the 600 level, and I doubt that one's $70K, but there was one in the 200 level that they brought us through, and there was like a buffet kind of section, and you can just like watch the game. And I was like, yeah, how much are these? And it's like, yeah, $70K for a year. You get access for both Leafs and Raptors.
Have you ever sat in a box for a game or any event before?
I have, once. Yeah.
Okay, me too. I went, so LeBron, I can't really remember if it was LeBron's rookie or sophomore year, but my dad worked at Toyota at the time and won like 2 tickets to a Toyota box. So there were like a bunch of people there. And it was it might have been only the first or second basketball game I've ever been to. But LeBron dropped a 50 piece and the Raptors won and I was sitting in a box. It took until the finals run for me to top that as a Raptors game experience.
That is awesome. Because I think my first ever Raptor game in person was like seeing Tyreek Evans drop a triple-double. But I paid probably $5 for that ticket. This one was not $5 to see this game. But yeah, it was actually really great. He was in a great mood. I took a bunch of photos. I said, make sure to brag to your coworkers. And he's like, yep, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So he is somewhere at work right now, showing photos to people.
How does he feel about, that was a bad loss for them 3 in a row now.
Yeah.
Is he like a big enough fan that he was like, oh man, this losing streak, what a terrible game you brought me to.
No. He was appreciative of the whole experience, but there were certainly frustrations throughout the game because the Leafs, I believe they took a 1-0 lead and then a 2-1 lead. They blew both, and it was actually interesting. So for me, it was also my first time going to a Leafs game. And after the first goal, they scored, and I stood up and clapped. And I was like, yeah, there we go. We took the lead, whatever. Kind of a lucky goal, to be honest. And the fan behind me was like, yo, sit down. I was like, what? After clapping for a goal,
man.
And then I looked around and whatever, we were not in the 100 levels or whatever, we were like the 300s, like proper fandom kind of places. And I was looking around and I was like, yeah, you know what, only half the people are standing up, so maybe I shouldn't be standing up. But I've never been told to sit down after celebrating a goal, man.
Man,
Like,
and
damn.
in that person's defense,
Yeah.
you're tall, you got a big head,
So you
but
stand up too. They scored
after
a
a
goal.
goal,
Yeah.
you got to give a little
Mhm.
selly there as they do. Last
Yeah.
hockey note, I am wearing a Newfoundland Growlers
I don't know
t-shirt.
what that is, man.
They're imagine the 905 had a CBL team that fed into the 905.
Okay, yeah.
They're that for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So this is their ECHL team, the Newfoundland Growlers. And shout out to my pal and happy birthday to Terry Ryan, who at 47 signed a 1-day contract and played for the Growlers on the weekend.
That's
Got in a fight.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Got in a fight too.
Yeah,
Wow.
my dad was very fired up. Like
Wow.
my dad's a big Leaf fan as well, like
Yeah,
yours, but he also pays attention to the Newfoundland Growlers because they're across the bay there from him, just a ferry ride away. So yeah, shout out to Terry Ryan.
I mean, big respect to anybody who's 47 and still playing sports, man. That's one of the things I respect most with my dad. He's like 56, 57-ish. Should know my dad's exact age. Sorry, Dad. But yeah, he's still playing center midfield for Milton FC and going strong for that group, still putting in probably 10 kilometers per game. But yeah, my other impression about the Leafs was just like, it's mad quiet. Like, I think we've complained a lot about like Raptor games getting more quiet or whatever. Like, no, it's night and day, man. Like the Raptor game sounds like a rock concert, and the Leafs game sounds like I went to the reference library. So,
David Sis, by the way, behind the glass, letting us know that Terry Ryan was actually on the Jeff Merrick show today. So if you want to know more about his 1 day with the Newfoundland Growlers, he's also on the show Shoresy, if you've ever heard of that television show. But he was on the Merrick show today, so you can listen to more of that. The 905 just lost, by the way, 108-105. Marquise Noel finishes with 20 points, 11 dimes, and I think that probably wraps up the weekend nonsense to talk about. We got I guess reheat the Raptors game from Friday because they didn't play Saturday, Sunday. Yeah. Makes for an awkward show Monday. That was obviously a big day for the show and a fun night after the show.
I was still like 20% lit for that recap.
Yeah. So the Raptors lose. It's a very, very poor defensive showing on the last game of a road trip against Big Shotgun Lauri Markkanen and a Utah Jazz team that the very next night won another really impressive game. They've now gone, 14-4 over their last 18. They won on the second night of a back-to-back against the Lakers after beating the Raptors. And earlier that week had won in Philly, in Milwaukee, and at home against Denver. So
in a row.
Yeah.
Like, not like this is just like a coincidence. Like, yeah, they've been on an incredible tear. Honestly, like, I'm curious to hear from your perspective. But for me, whatever. We've seen the Raptors give up a bunch of points. The defense we'll talk about in a second. But was that the most impressive opposing team performance you've seen against the Raptors this season? Because to me, it probably was.
Like relative to expectations and record and things like that, I think
just even quality of execution as a team, like
yeah. The only other one that comes to mind, and it wasn't really the same style, but like Portland played by far their best game of the year against the Raptors, but that was in retrospect probably a warning sign about the Raptors more than an encouraging sign about. But like Portland will look back at that, and that's their signature game of the season. As sad as that is, probably.
I think Ayton had like 17, 18 rebounds.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, Utah shot 56% in that one, 49% on threes. They got to the line a ton. They controlled the glass at both ends of the floor. They really didn't turn over the ball a ton, which is kind of a Lauri Markkanen special, even though he had a couple there. And yeah, their starters beat the brakes off the Raptors starters. Their bench unit beat the brakes off the Raptors bench unit.
Their third unit was good.
Yeah. What do you make? I get it's just 2 games that we've seen them. But a pretty good 17-point comeback against the Raptors in Toronto. And now this like buzzer-to-buzzer steamrolling of the Raptors. In addition to just the execution, Will Hardy, pretty good coaching job with this group as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not like you look at the roster and you're like, okay, I'm gonna start Simeone Fontecchio as my 3. I'm going to go with John Collins as my starting 5. I'm going to switch and play a ton of zone with this group. And then I'm going to go start Chris Dunn as well. And
now, that's something I would do and would have done over the last 8 years, starting Chris Dunn. But yeah, Fontecchio is normally like a middle back, not a starting small forward.
No, I mean, it was actually like incredible watching him like just splash 2 threes in the corners to start the third quarter and just attacking closeouts, and he's strong. But the way they execute as a team and just the off-ball actions, I was so impressed by. Like, I mean, you have a weapon like Lauri Markkanen. Of course, it opens up a lot of options for you. But the fact that they have this like 6'11" guy who's just coming off of off-ball screens and either has an option to cut back door to catch a lob for a dunk or lift to the top to catch and shoot for 3, like they just kept constantly running actions late into the shot clock, getting great possessions. And of course, you're used to playing this like, okay, I need to guard everything on the floor type of team basketball, and then Jordan Clarkson comes in and it's the total opposite approach, a complete change up. Now you got to guard a guy who's going to shoot no matter what, and yeah, I mean they just kicked the Raptors behind like on every aspect of the game.
And I think what you're saying about all the off-ball movement, all the different ways to get guys involved, that's kind of, I dove into what's made Lauri Markkanen's season so good on the pregame show. That's why I had to leave Alex's event a little early and come back to the studio. And one of the most fascinating things is Markkanen is the only forward in the league who hits even close to his thresholds for 2-point percentage, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage, not turning the ball over and things like that. But if you were going to come up with a knock against him, it's that, well, he doesn't really create for others. He averages fewer than 2 assists a game. And so many of his buckets, as far as a star level scorer goes, he has way more of his buckets assisted for him than a traditional like top scoring level all-star. And I think you see why in a game like that. It's like, yeah, he doesn't need to, because that offense needs him to be an elite 3-level play finisher, but they can create those advantages for him, get him in his spots, even though, like you said, the point guard play here is like Chris Dunn, Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, Keontae George, who is nice, but had a kind of a rough one in that one, and everything still flowed really well.
Yeah. Defensively, two totally different teams defensively. The Raptors just couldn't guard them whatsoever. The Jazz actually did an amazing job of keeping the Raptors out of the paint. And so I want to ask you about this because something worth tracking. Raptors have played 7 games since the trade of OG Anunoby. In those 7 games, the Raptors are 28th in the NBA in defensive rating. The only 2 teams worse are Detroit at 29, which is a bit of a surprise that they're not the worst. Golden State at 30th, which, I mean, they don't have Draymond, I suppose, but also we saw what Golden State looked like. The Raptors, like, beat them so easily. Raptors 28th in defensive rating since the trade. On the flip side, the Knicks are actually number 1 in defense over the last 7 games with OG in the lineup. But in any case, your thoughts about the Raptors being this bad defensively?
Yeah, it was the biggest concern of not only the trade when you trade out OG Anunoby, who's your best individual defender. We talked about, okay, this team had already started to slide on defense, even with OG Anunoby and with Scottie Barnes. This also fundamentally changes Scottie Barnes' role, where OG Anunoby was Mr. Versatility, who would guard whoever the top scorer is in the opposing team, whatever the position, and that allowed Scottie to kind of stay in that lower third of the floor, create havoc that way. He's been so good defensively like that. Well, now you've not only lost OG, you've had to pull Scottie up from that backline role to the main point of attack guy, and he's guarding all sorts of different players night to night. And there's no Scottie Barnes backfill for that role, right? Like there's nobody in there. You've also, yes, you've lost Jakob Poeltl at the same time, and Jonte Porter is trying defensively. The results haven't been that great. He looks okay eye test wise, about where I expected him to be. But this was a guy who, with the 905, they were putting power forwards guarding the pick and roll against tougher pick and roll combinations and letting Jonte Porter stay in the weak side corner and help out of there and crash as a defensive rebounder or a help side shot blocker or whatever. He is not expected to be, certainly not at this stage and maybe ever, like a top line pick and roll defender. So now you've taken, your guards are already a little weaker in terms of point of attack defense. Now you've taken your best and most versatile perimeter defender in OG Anunoby, lost him, asked Scottie Barnes to do that role, which he's done pretty admirably, but he's, nobody is OG in terms of that role. And then you've lost the Scottie role by moving him. So it's just kind of this cascade, and it gets, it feels heavy once you consider that even before losing OG, they were already a pretty bad defense over the last couple of weeks. So this is one where, when we talked last week about all the optimism we have here with the offense and everything that looks good, I did kind of pour cold water on. I was like, defensively, though, this is going to be a question mark. And they're down to 21st, I almost said.
Yeah, that's fine.
21st overall on the entire season now. So this is more extreme lately, but they haven't been a good defensive team since the first couple weeks of the season.
So it's interesting to me because you clearly see Scottie stepping up to fill OG's role. And he's doing an admirable job with that. Who's actually going to help take up Scottie's former role as that helper? And to me, looking at all the options in the starting group, that needs to be Pascal Siakam. But Pascal, I don't even think his individual defense has been particularly strong, but his help defense is not really there. And I think this is something that, for me, I would love to see, because before Scottie came around, that was Pascal's role. OG was obviously always the guy guarding the toughest assignments, and then Pascal was the roamer and the helper. Sometimes he would even play 5, and of course, if you're playing 5, you're always going to need the help. But that's who needs to step up for Scottie's role, and I just haven't seen that in the slightest.
And we've saw Pascal, look, he's had a tremendous season overall. He's been very, very good offensively. He's changed his role a million times for this team.
Sure.
But defensively, it hasn't been there for the most part this year. Like, I would say he's probably been average defensively, which is a lot lower than the level we've come to expect from him. And there have been nights where he's certainly below average. So I do think that's a problem. And I think you're right, because there are two ways we could answer what we're talking about here. And one is Pascal to play in that Scottie role on the back end. And no, he doesn't have the vertical bounce that Scottie does. He's not gonna block shots the way Scottie does. Nobody on this roster is going to.
Yeah.
But you could ask him to play a role he's played before and do that. Or you could keep Scottie in that role and ask Pascal to pick up more of the slack at the point of attack. And if you remember back to not the most recent Cavs game, but the one prior, when OG shut off Donovan Mitchell, but Garland went off late in the game.
Yeah.
And we discussed after that game, well, what about Scottie? Like, Scottie Barnes stayed on Garland down the stretch there, and Pascal was kind of off the ball on Mobley. Would you have switched those? And we kind of kicked it around like, well, Pascal on Garland, maybe that suits Pascal a little bit more. It keeps Scottie in the help role. So that's the other way they could utilize Pascal to help with the defense now.
Okay,
but I don't think his point of attack defense has been as good as we're used to. I do also think, and I know
he's been weirdly okay on guards though. Like,
yeah,
I feel like there were some good possessions
I think
he
he's
had
better
against
suited to that than
Fox, Ja.
even
Malik
Steph.
Monk,
Like, Scottie had the main assignment on Steph, but when Scottie was off the floor, it was Pascal doing the same kind of thing, using the length for the top blocking and to drive him into help. So I guess you could use Pascal that way and move Scottie back into the other role. But I know there was a quote from Darko Rajakovic at practice on Sunday that caught your ear in terms of Scottie's deployment in that role. What did you make of that? Well, if you could fill us in on Darko's comments and what you made of that as it pertains to Scottie's defense.
So the Raptors practiced yesterday. So Aaron Rose asked both Darko and Scottie about the new role where he's taking out for OG as the stopper. And Darko's answer was Scottie loves it. Scottie loves, as part of his development, as part of his challenge, is that, for him to grow into the next level, he needs to do this kind of thing. And so he's sort of building around, A, there's enthusiasm, and B, this is something that, is going to be good for him long term. You can basically sell me any strategy if you tell me it's good for Scottie long term.
Scottie Barnes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
He's going to be the face of the league.
And then Scottie was asked about it too. And Scottie did kind of like let it slip that it was like, yes, it's very tiring. I mean, you don't need to let it slip. Everyone knows that it's tiring. But yeah, I mean, this is something he talked about too, about coming into the league, that he always thought of himself as a strong defender, and he really wanted to relish that challenge. So we might also just be seeing the growing pains of that. But the point isn't necessarily about, what role Scottie is in so much as what's the balance that's going to help for the rest of the team. And I do feel like somebody has to step up for Scottie's role as that helper.
Yeah, and I don't know who that is going. Like, theoretically,
I think Scottie's on-ball defense has been mostly fine.
Yeah,
I haven't really complained about that.
No, this isn't a Scottie problem. It's only having one Scottie problem.
Yeah.
So, there are a couple areas, like getting Jakob Poeltl back eventually would stabilize some of the pick and roll defense a little bit. But also, like, Dennis Schroeder has to be better at the point of attack in pick and roll. RJ Barrett, Gary Trent, whoever it is, Quickly's been solid, but Quickly, even still, I like Quickly's defense overall.
But it looks like they're trying to hide him, man.
And it's also like he's very good in a similar way to we're talking about Scottie at point of attack versus Scottie, off ball as a helper and kind of a chaos creator. Quickly's very, very good in team defense situations, scramble situation, help him recover situations. But at the actual point of attack and pick and roll isn't quite as strong as those other skills for him. So you've got a handful of guards who maybe aren't doing the best job or require some like tactical concessions in pick and roll. Okay. So those guys could step up. Pascal could step up in that Siakam role a little bit more. One of these bench guys who's getting an opportunity, and I don't think it'll be Jonte Porter because he's more of a drop style center. But if you're Boucher or McDaniels and you're fighting for those minutes and you're getting an 8-minute window and trying to make your impact felt, that's got to come defensively, because like Boucher obviously crashes the glass, does a lot in transition. We like Chris, but McDaniels is here and got a 2-year deal because they like the defense and we're hoping they could massage the offense enough to be playable. We haven't really seen him make that defensive impact really either. So no one's going to step up and do 35 minutes of that Scottie role, but if you could get a couple guys giving you a couple more good minutes, but right now it's been kind of a whiff on that around the board.
Yeah. A bit of a worrying stat here, too. So the Raptors have allowed 130 or more points to their opponent 5 times already this season. We're not even through half the year, by the way. We're close to the halfway part of the year, but, through less than half the season, the Raptors have already allowed 130 or more 5 times. last season, for the entire 82, they only did it 3 times. 2022, the year they won 48 games, allowed it twice. Even in the Tampa season, they only allowed it twice. And then once in 2020, once in 2019. So the fact that they've already done it 5 times, like they're like on pace to do it 10 times.
It's a lot of times.
Yeah, it is a lot of times.
And like, look,
and part of it is, of course, the league is trending in the right direction, like in this offensive, path and whatever. But
offensive rating is at an all-time high league wide, and that's so offensive rating controls for pace. We're talking per 100 possessions. So not only is the league playing at a bit of a faster pace right now, not historically fast, but certainly faster than the last few years and what we're accustomed to.
Yeah.
But also on a per possession basis, it's the highest it's ever been. So you're going to see a lot of these stats. Like the Pacers put up 150 every night. It feels like even with Tyrese Halliburton hurt, they're putting up numbers close to that. But it's troubling because I think 130-ish is a number where you're just like you can't, I don't care what pace the game is or how good your offense is, you can't see 130 on the other side and be any level of confident you can win that game. Like you're like, okay, well, we must have gotten red hot shooting. It was also Friday night was the 3rd most points they've allowed ever in the history of the franchise.
Yeah.
You know how bad some of the teams in this franchise's history have been?
Yes, exactly. So I don't know how they fix it, but they absolutely need to fix it if they have any chance of being competitive.
Okay,
but,
so this game ended 145-113. That final Jazz total got padded a little bit by some garbage time.
I don't know, man. They were beating us in regular time too.
They were, but there was about 8 minutes of garbage time where they expanded the lead by 8 more points, and I pivot to us there because Grady Dick played all 8 of those minutes. He actually played 12 minutes in this game. He went 0 for 3. He missed both of his twos. Did have a pair of assists, but none of the shots dropped. He's got a 0 on the points total. So Grady Dick, I thought, would go back down with the 905 after this one. The 905 today played game 2 of a 3-game, 5-day road trip. Instead, the Raptors have decided to keep Grady Dick up with them. He'll be with them tonight. He's questionable, actually, with a thumb sprain. But what do you make of this? Grady Dick not only being a part of that game on the fringe of the rotation, but not going back down there to the 905 immediately after.
I think it's a bit of a missed opportunity. I think he needs to play more and more time with the 905, and whether that's rediscovering his shot, whether that's getting his confidence, whether that's adjusting the physicality, he needs to spend a lot of time there. Like, there's not much that he's like. I'm going to be completely honest about it. There's nothing that he's providing to the Raptors for the big club. Like in a winning and losing kind of context.
I asked you Friday, do you care that he's up? And you said no. And like I don't think either of us thought he was going to get minutes. And then that game was just so out of hand.
Yeah, and that's not me like dismissing him as a prospect. Like, I think this whole conversation needs to be divorced from that idea. Like, we could put that caveat on the top of it, and then we could just speak freely about this. But he is not providing anything at an NBA like level right now towards actual winning. So that's why he needs to be prioritized in his development, and that's why he should spend as much time with the 905. But Blake, I want to ask you, like, there was clearly a little bit of expectation that Grady can come in and contribute. Again, going back to that quote
Bobby
that
Webster
Bobby
quotes,
said on draft night about, it's going to be up to the coaches, but we do feel like, there might be an opportunity for him to, come in and knock down some few shots. That's been the biggest problem. I don't think there's like that many complaints about, okay, he's not rebounding amazing, or he's not playmaking amazing, or even his defense is like, not strong, but, we kind of knew that. But the one thing he was billed to do, which was to come in and knock down shots, the sample was small for sure, but both in the G League and at the NBA level, he's shooting in the 20s from 3. What are you seeing from Grady? Like, is the shot just completely gone? What is it?
Yeah, we're at 118 3-point attempts between the NBA and the G League. And you need something like 700 3-point attempts for it to stabilize, but it's not good. Yeah. And like, look, the eye test matches that. Like, I think the early chunk of his NBA time, you at least saw him still trying to get those shots off, and they just weren't dropping or whatever. But and he denies this, but I think you saw a little bit of the confidence. How could the confidence not decrease? It's the first time since you were a literal child that your shot's gone away or hasn't been dropping. And some of it might be the NBA 3-point line, the length and speed guys close out on you. Like, we saw him before you went down to the G League. There was a lot of like hesitation and a pump fake where maybe you didn't need a pump fake. And then after the pump fake, you're either rushing the sidestep or traveling when you go into the next, or you let that floater off, you don't travel, and you get into floater range and you rush it and get it off maybe 3 feet further away than you need to because that NBA length is in your head now. And it took, honestly, a long time for him in the G League. Like, he's played 10 G League games this year, which is exactly where I set the over-under for you and Alex at the start of the season. I can't remember if it was 9.5 or 10.5, but that's where I put the number for him on the season. He's already there. And look, the last couple games he had with the 905, we're trending in the right direction. But I tweeted this out when he got called up. They have trended in the right direction, but not to the point where I think he can give you NBA minutes right now. And I think that, you are running a little bit of a risk. Look, at some point this year, you're going to need to see what he can look like in NBA minutes. I think you're running a little bit of the risk undercutting the work you're trying to do in the 905 if he's coming up and not playing, and then he's seeing 4 minutes of spot duty, and if a shot or two doesn't go down there, and then you're only playing garbage time otherwise, I think you're running a risk of, again, undercutting what you're trying to accomplish in the G League, even though it's not like he's been, going off in the G League either. He's just like, he's been a little more solid and a little steadier. And two of the last 3 games before he got called up, the shots were dropping. I just think he needs to be down there more. I don't know what he does for this team as a 12th man type right now that wouldn't be worth trading in for, hey, maybe come March, he can be something because he's getting the reps down there.
Yeah, so let me give you a little player B stat lines. Okay. Player A, this is G League numbers. Player A in the G League at age 20, 16.7 points, 5.7 rebounds, 2.0 assists in 34 minutes per game, shooting 47% from the field and 25% from three.
Okay.
That's player A at age 20 in the G League. Player B, age 20 in the G League, 14.7 points, 6.5 rebounds, 1.7 assists in 34 minutes per game on 40% from the field and 34% from three.
So am I just picking between those?
No, there's not much to pick from. Honestly,
that's player B, Norm?
No.
Oh.
Well, player A is obviously great.
Yeah,
we talked about it. Player B is Bruno.
Okay, in his second year.
In his second year.
Okay.
Yeah, as a 20-year, because we got to compare age-wise. Yeah. I'm not saying that he's Bruno. There's no way that he's Bruno. Bruno came in with such unique circumstances. I don't think that. I think what it suggests to me is that these are the 2 youngest prospects that the Raptors have ever brought in. I think Scottie was maybe 1 year older than Grady. Was he a year older than Grady?
Yeah. Ish, like 6 months or something like that. Grady was like the youngest guy in his draft class.
Well, even if you just look at physical development, like Scottie came in like fully ready to play, and Grady is like, all right, like he's going to take a little bit of work. But yeah, in terms of just like green to the league, it feels like it's been in Masai's tenure at least. It's been Grady and then Bruno. And of course, like Bruno's such an exceptional case. My point is not to say that he's Bruno. This is a ridiculous thing. What I'm trying to say is that he is so young and there are so many things that need to teach him that, yeah, I mean, you kind of have to write off this year in terms of production for the big club. It's going to have to be just pure development.
I don't even know if you need to write off the whole year because like I just looked up Norm's stats.
What's magically going to change?
I don't think you need that much runway to like figure something, and like who knows, maybe he goes down and he has a game where he's like 5 to 6 on threes and suddenly that's not going to fix everything, but the confidence comes back around, he's shooting a little more. Like okay. Norm only spent 8 games with the night. Like Grady has already played more than Norm there, more than Jakob there, more than Pascal did there until playoff time when they were just like, yo, let's get Blake a knockoff ring to eventually go with his knockoff Raptors ring.
Nice.
By the way, Norm shot 33% on threes. Is obviously he scored way more than Grady or Bruno, but percentages wise, that was something that still wasn't there yet for him. He needed the NBA sample to kind of take off on it. I just, whether it's later this year or future years, I just don't see. We've seen too many examples of what works and what doesn't work with guys going up and down from the G League to think that like 3-4 minutes of garbage time versus 30 minutes in the G League is a worthwhile trade-off. And I got it, the games where they only had 9 or 10 guys and Garrett Temple's playing real minutes. If you wanted to give those to Grady in a situation like that, I would understand it.
But productivity wise, I'm absolutely serious that Garrett Temple would be a better option.
Certainly. Yeah. But if you wanted to say like, hey, Garrett Temple's not a part of the future, we'll take it on the chin and we'll let Grady have those minutes. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about he got in that Jazz game because it was a blow and that's it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would have been nice if they also passed to him a little bit too, because it felt like he was just like standing around. And I'm like, oh, Grady's in the game. There's a reason to watch this fourth quarter at the last 7 minutes, but then he never actually got the ball either.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, there's obviously a lot of concern after you draft a player. It's like, okay, how are the rest of the peers doing, right? So I'll ask you this because in that same range, Jordan Hawkins went 14th, right? He just had 34 over the weekend. Not like he's up and down all season, but I mean, still 34 is 34. Jaime Hawkins Jr. went later. Brandon Pajemski went later. Keontae George went later. Cam Whitmore went later. Cubby Buffkin, who is maybe untouchable in trades. I love how many people are untouchable a month before the trade deadline. We'll see who's touching what.
And like, look, that's a good list of names, and you can understand some of why they didn't like Hawkes. A lot of teams pass on. A lot of teams that I spoke to or NBA people I spoke to, people were very confident Hawkes was going to be an NBA rotation player. Yeah. But was what he looked like day one the upside? And so if you're a team like the Miami Heat,
if Jaime Hawkins went to free agency next year, what's he getting? Like at the end of the season,
the mid level,
just the mid level.
I mean, we're talking about where we've got 3 months of watching the guy, but like potentially even more.
Fine. He's already at a.
You always got to worry about a guy leaving the Miami Heat.
You do have to worry about that to some extent, but honestly, Jaime Hawkins to me is just really, really good overall.
But I'm saying
if Brady's going to free agency right now, like after this season,
he's getting that Svi Mykhailiuk.
That's what I'm saying. That's already a big difference.
Yeah, and I'm just saying that was the book on Hawkes at draft time, and then Keontae George and Kobe Buffkin were in the mix with Grady Dick. Buffkin has missed most of the season hurt, but he's been electric for College Park since he came back from injury. Whitmore is the one that you can understand, even though he's a nice prospect. There was a lot of injury red tape on him. But
he seems
either way, like in a redraft right now, very few NBA front offices are going to overreact to the first couple months of a guy's career on a 4-year contract. But I don't think, like Grady Dick was outside of the top 4 picks, the only person who was consensus ranked top 20 in this draft class across like the Vicinis and Javonis and Jeremy Woos and people like that. Yeah. He was this draft was so wide open. He was the only other guy who was a consensus top 20. This isn't just a Raptors whiff if this ends up being a whiff. Like everyone thought at least the shot would translate.
No, of course. And again, like, this whole conversation, and going back to the context that we put onto this, is like not that we're out on, but it's sort of just like long-term wise, he needs to find the 3-point shot or else this is going to look really, really tough, especially with other players in this range, because it's not like the whole draft was a brick. Like there's like 6 or 7 guys that we're taking right after that I think a lot of people would be really happy about right now. But my personal hope for Grady is just he's able to use the G League time productively. He's able to find the range on the 3-point shot. I do feel like a little bit, there is a bit of a forward motion with his shot. He's not Chris Boucher slinging the ball, but if there is some sort of forward sling motion in the shot, it's going to be a little bit difficult to, vary and adjust and shooting off like movement, because you can kind of like time it based on what spots you're on the floor. But if you're always flinging the ball a little bit and you're moving and you're like having to adjust, it's just too many moving parts for me. Even looking at some of the no analytics of like watching him shoot or practice, it's not as consistent as you would see from like a guy like Gary. Gary like will give you like consistent like lines straight down the middle on the greens, all 3 greens. Like you do see like inconsistency there. That's fine. It's just used this year to like just take it, develop it, and just get back to a point where next season, if there's some ability to come in and contribute, because there's a huge spot for Grady to take up, and I still very much believe in his abilities. It's just that, so far it just looks to be like he's not ready yet for year one. That's not the first time that's happened to a rookie either.
6-game Raptors 905 homestand begins Saturday. I would hope he's there at most of those. You want to take a break and talk to Lewis?
Let's do it. We're going to take our first break of the day. I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Ben Luke, and to be joined by Blake Murphy, co-host of The Raptors Show, and we are joined by a third Raptors Republic member. We're like a gang at this point. Louis Zatzman, what's going on, man? You all right?
I'm wonderful. We swamp Raptors media. It's true. We're everywhere.
We really
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Anytime. We got to come up with like a I don't know, like a sign or something, So maybe we'll.
I don't know how to make an R with my fingers. We just take the Rough Riders logo and we'll all get chains.
All right, we'll talk to Zarar about that. Make some more merch. Still need my RR merch, by the way. I'd love to wear that on air. All right. We wanted to start this discussion by talking about Scottie Barnes because, as people know, today is the votes are triple. So we have not yet done like a full Scottie Barnes propaganda segment, but I kind of want to because, today the votes are worth triple. And also I think, in terms of bright spots for the season, Scottie's jump has been that bright spot. So, Louis, I'll start with you. Most likely he's not going to be voted into the All-Star game. But there's a chance he makes it as a reserve. just in terms of quality of play for you, is he an all-star for you in the Eastern Conference?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I think there's a lot more to the argument, but just right off the top, without a doubt, yes.
Okay, without a doubt, yes. So to frame the conversation, at least the basic box score numbers have Scottie at 20.4 points per game, 8.4 rebounds, 5.7 assists, 1.3 steals, 1.5 blocks. His slashing line is 48% from the field overall, 38 from three, 74 from the foul line. His advanced metrics are really, really good.
Yeah, if you care about such things, yeah. So dunks and threes, which has EPM, which is my favorite catch-all, and this would be aware of the fact that the Raptors have not been very good as a team. He's still 9th in the Eastern Conference in estimated wins added. So again, I know people don't really care about those kind of metrics, but if you do, those back up the counting stats that we're seeing as well as the eye test.
There you go. So, and yeah, for the All-Star game, you would have 6 front court, 4 back court, and then 2 wild card spots. For me, in terms of locks for the front court, like we're just talking locks, not guys worthy. Front court locks are Giannis and Tatum for me. After that, you would need to have a little bit of a discussion. I'll probably say yes to a lot of those other guys, but 3 of them are spoken for. Backcourt is actually quite crowded. Halliburton, Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, Tyrese Maxey, they should all be on the All-Star team. That's leaving out Brunson, who I'm giving one of the wild card spots to automatically. So essentially, we're talking about like 4 spots that Scottie could be in contention for. Guys in that range: Mikal Bridges, Jaylen Brown, Bam Adebayo, Julius Randle, Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner. I might be leaving other people out.
Did you mention Kristaps Porzingis?
Kristaps Porzingis, yes. There you go. That's a good one. So
it's not. I feel gross about it, but we know how these things go, and there will be a handful of Celtics in this thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Lewis, I wanted to ask you, what is Scottie doing that's like stand out above the likes of Bridges, Brown, Adebayo, Randle, Banchero, Wagner, and Porzingis?
Yeah. So I did some quick math. Over the past 5 years, 50 shooting guards, small forwards, or power forwards have made the All-Star game. So about 10 a year. But of those 50, only 6 have come from losing or teams that did not make the playoffs.
Okay.
So you're looking at about 1 guy a year at shooting guard, small forward, or power forward who is an all-star, doesn't make the playoffs. But if you compare Barnes to the history of those 6, you're looking at Brandon Ingram's Devin Booker in 1920, Zach LaVine, Sabonis in 2021, and Zion, and then last year was Lauri Markkanen. I think Barnes is having a better year than any of those guys by pretty wide margin if you look at advanced stats. So you said, what is he doing? It's like everything, right? He does everything for the Raptors. He is their second best shooter now. He creates advantages. He finishes them. He is one of their best defenders, maybe the best now. He just he does everything. And that's pretty much a normal all-star is a guy on a middling team, slightly below average, who just does everything, fills up all the stats. It's a normal all-star case, right? And I think it's way above guys who are like the 3rd best player on good teams, or one of 4 good guys on a good team. I think Barnes is for me above guys like Jaylen Brown, Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, even though, and the advanced stats say that as well. He is pretty high above guys like that.
Like, I'll ask you this.
Scottie Barnes is going to be all-star.
By the way, I think Darko has already made the case for us, but Blake, I'd love to hear you do an impersonation of that.
I'm not going to do that. What I will say is, I think there's a lot in there with what Lewis is saying. These things tend to come down to there are 10 or 12 guys for 5 or 6 spots. And, I know everyone pushes back every year. There's always like a list of snubs. And then it's like, well, who would you take off? It gets difficult to that. And I'm going to kind of kick this back to you guys, and I'll start with Lewis. There is also an element to this where, defense probably doesn't matter for all-star voting. It probably helps if you're if you have a two-way reputation, but the role that Scottie Barnes plays defensively versus someone like, certainly a Julius Randle, either of the big forwards in Orlando, someone like a Trae Young, if he's in the mix or whatever, the load on Scottie defensively is much larger there. And Lewis, does that factor in for you at all? And I guess projecting ahead to what other people think, do you think it matters?
I think highlights matter.
Okay.
Defensive highlights matter more than defense. And the dude gets blocks. I think there's a lot of, Canada is not a particularly watchable market. Like it's harder for fans of other teams, even media of other teams, to watch the Raptors play, but coaches do. And I think in general, when you watch Barnes highlights, you're going to see unbelievable above the rim, like even at the top of the box blocks. So yeah, Barnes does more than Julius Randle on the defensive end, more than Franz Wagner, but that doesn't matter. I don't think it needs to matter for Barnes' case, though.
You know what's been unique about watching Scottie? Like he's at 1.5 blocks per game, which is just for a wing is like absurd. He blocks like a variety of different shots in a variety of different ways. Like there was the first play of the Jazz game where he rotated out to the corner and he like blocked the shot even before the guy was able to get the ball out of his hands. Like you can see some block threes, like the infamous Zion block three when he was at Duke, where the guy was shooting out the corner and he like jumped so high and he blocked it out of midair. It felt like he blocked it out of like 12 feet midair, like a Chris Boucher block for threes, right?
Yeah.
Scottie like timed the rotation so well, he blocked it in his hand. Like that was how well that rotation is. Or like he'll sometimes do things where, okay, a guy beats him. Sometimes I almost feels like he almost is okay with letting a guy get like a half step on him, try to get downhill, and then he jumps up and he volleyball tips it out of bounds.
I mean, that's a real strategy if you're guarding in pick and roll or you lose a guy off an off a pin down or something like that. Is it worth it to risk fouling on the floor to try to get back in position, but you're only in ground position, you're not in a position to contest, versus just kind of letting him get the edge and trying to block it from behind? It's a reasonable strategy.
There's like the type of blocks that he gets where a guy's trying to go one-on-one against him and pull up. He blocks those.
He had I can't remember if it was Clippers in another game, but he had like a double block the other day where he like jumped up, contested, and blocked the shot, and then someone went up with the offensive rebound and he on a second jump. Yeah.
That was a Laker game.
Ridiculous.
He's got the help side blocks as well. So to me, it's just like in terms of diversity of the type of shots that he's blocking, it's also really unique. But yeah, I mean, I think on the offensive end, that's probably where most players get their most all-star votes, is by putting up these huge numbers. You could put it on NBA Central and it'll be redistributed everywhere. You don't even have to watch the game no more because you see a good box stat line. On that front, on the counting numbers, I think to me it's been really interesting to watch his jump offensively as well, because coming into the season, one of our concerns was, not even concerns, we just had a discussion. Can Scottie average over 20 a game this year? And he has been. Like the whole season, he's been above that mark. He's not the number one option, which may cut down on some of the scoring. However, he finds ways to score in a variety of ways. And, of course, most importantly, he takes over in the fourth quarter, which always adds to the impact of watching those the points being scored. Like, I wanted to ask you, like, offensively, just on that end, because I think defensively he's absolutely a top 12 player in the conference. Offensively, is he an all-star for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think he is. Like, I would have him on my ballot if I had one right now. I think where optically, or when you're comparing stat lines or just even the feel around the league with some of these, is like, yeah, he probably defers to others or looks to create for others more than someone in his position might. So you're leaving a couple points per game on the table on a team that until recently didn't have very much shooting to take advantage of your passing. And I don't mean that as a criticism of him. It's better for the team. It's better for getting Barrett and quickly, into the flow and things like that. But yeah, there's a reason that there are only a handful. Lewis, you use the about one per year all-star that fits these certain criteria. There's about one all-NBA guy a year too that has a sub 25% usage rate. It's fair. It's not impossible. It happens, but it doesn't happen all that often because people tend to look at scoring first. So I think the versatility in the offensive skill set here is really, really strong. I think it's a huge credit to Scottie that he could probably push his usage rate as high as he wants and no one would blink at it, and the counting stats would be a little higher, but that's not the way he plays ball, and that's not the way I don't think that's the way he thinks about or enjoys basketball. But I think even acknowledging that, 28-6 with the blocks and steals, with 38% on threes this year, with all the underlying metrics, worth noting too, his usage percentage, even though it's not superstar level, it's up like 4 percentage points this year, and his true shooting percentage has gone through the roof. He's been way more efficient in a heavier role too. There are not a lot of ways you could chop it up where I don't think Scottie's an all-star. I think the only thing is the team record. And I think that knowing and talking to coaches over the years about how they vote, I would probably lean toward I don't think he's going to get in right now, even though I do think he deserves it because coaches look at the standing sheet and they go down the standings like that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. The other
coaches
thing is
do
points per game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
he's just at 20, which is like 20 something in the conference. But the other guys who are higher than him are in general just 22, 21. Like there's a huge number of guys averaging between 20 and 24. And it's really not a lot at 25 and above. So I actually don't think, you mentioned just like you don't need to watch the game. You can just look at, those aggregator accounts. I think the points per game doesn't actually hurt him. And he's so high above everyone else, in assists and rebounds and stocks and all that. So yeah, no, I'm with you, Blake. It's also just like, as far as highlights go, I know I keep getting into this. Who has a better highlight mix than Scottie this year? Anyone in the East? Maybe Giannis?
Yeah, I mean, Maxey, but a lot of it's like if you weren't paying attention to Maxey earlier in the year, Halliburton with the jump passes. But Halliburton's like his own all-star class anyway, by the way, because the game is in Indy, and I'm pretty sure the league will nudge everyone and be like, make sure he's on the roster, but he's also hurt, so we'll see if he even plays. Like, he might be like a free extra all-star when we're going through these scenarios where he's going to get in and then be injury replaced.
By the way, how is he only out for 2 weeks? I saw that play happen live where he slipped on the floor.
I'll believe it when I see it.
He did a full splits, and they had to carry him off the court with like a towel over his head. Like, I thought it was like, oh my God, like, or did we just lose him for the year kind of thing?
Yeah.
And he's out for 2 weeks, and he's like,
it reminded me a lot of the DeMar one when he with the adductor.
Yeah, against Dallas.
Yeah, it was like 19 games it cost him, and then Kyle ended up breaking down because Kyle was playing like 49 minutes a game while DeMar was out.
The Raptors were somehow winning, though. That's the thing with Kyle. Is it doesn't matter how he's going to make it happen, but he's going to make it win. But yeah, I don't know, man. I think, for the three of us, he's an all-star. I just wanted to vet the case a little bit, but to be honest, like, I think the case is really strong. It's going to have to be a reserve, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The vote is, I don't imagine you're catching up at this point, but you could try to vote still. Counts triple today, you said?
Counts are triple today.
Yeah.
So,
vote.nba.com.
Yeah. Lewis, are you going to be at the game today or what? Am I going to see you down there?
I'll be there.
All right.
See you guys there.
Oh, the best part about that means Samson's not going to be there. So.
Oh, wow. Well, I have no comments on that front. I actually rather like Samson. So
Me too.
You guys can be mean to him if you want to.
It's
on national television.
It's just banter.
No, I'm kidding. Okay, Lewis, I'll see you down there.
All right, guys. Always a blast. Appreciate chatting with you.
Yeah, appreciate you too, man. Okay, before we go to break, actually, since we're on the subject of Scottie Barnes for All-Star.
Whoop.
All right, we are not breaking it. That's okay. Since you're on the subject, so yeah, the NBA All-Star Game is a month away, and you have the chance to vote your favorite Raptors, such as Scottie Barnes, into the game for Indianapolis today and Friday, January 19th. Your votes count triple, as we said. So make sure you head to NBA.com or the NBA app to cast your vote. Good luck navigating the NBA app. That was not written in the promo. That's my own usage of that app, let's just say. To celebrate All-Star voting, we are giving away a signed Scottie Barnes jersey. That's right. So to enter for a chance to win, text today's code word Barnes to 59590. Again, today's code word is Barnes. Text us in to 59590 right now to enter for your chance to win the signed Scottie Barnes jersey.
You have to text it in Darko's voice, though. I don't know how you do that over text, but we need it. You need to text it in as if
Scottie Barnes.
Yeah, exactly like that.
There you go. But just Barnes, not the
just
first
Barnes.
One.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, anyway, we're gonna take a break. Been your host Willow. You've been listening to the Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network.
Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm Blake Murphy alongside William Liu. Raptors back in action tonight after Saturday, Sunday off. They will host the Boston Celtics down at Scotiabank Arena. It is the first of a 3-game, 4-day homestand. We'll have the game for you on Sportsnet 590. The Fan. They're playing the Celtics tonight. The Celtics will be without Jaylen Brown. He has a knee hyperextension, did not participate in shoot-around today. Let's find out what the trickle down from that might be. We're joined now by Jared Weiss of The Athletic, my old teammate. Jared, what's up, man? How are you?
What's up, buddy? Good to see you.
Man, the hair and beard combo length is working right now. It's a good look for you, buddy.
I'm just following your lead. I'm just finding my inspiration and I'm sticking to it.
Got to ask you before we get into tonight's stuff and Celtics big picture stuff. Ime Udoka was back head to head with Joe Mazzulla the other day. That's a relevant question. You wrote a really good piece about it at The Athletic. But Jason Tatum also got tossed from that game. And why did he not use visual aids to make his case as he was getting booted from that one? Mike Brown of the Sacramento Kings doing so yesterday. How close are we toward like film projectors now when guys are arguing with referees and griping their cases after the game?
I want, like, those overhead projectors when we were kids. They have the translucent thing. Yeah. If you're not using an overhead projector, are you really even trying in the NBA?
No, absolutely not. Mike Brown has changed the game. We'll see how it goes from there. So Udoka was back against Joe Mazzulla. That was obviously not a planned transition for the Boston Celtics in the head coaching position. Udoka lost that role through non-basketball things that we could get into another time. Mazzulla, kind of an unexpected choice given his age and experience level to take over. So yes, Saturday rather, a nice point of reflection for anyone who didn't read your piece at The Athletic. What did you what kind of resonated with you as you reflect on that change here a year and a half in?
Yeah, I was looking at the night thinking, obviously the story here, whenever Ime Udoka is brought up in Boston, is understanding what happened. We know it was an inappropriate workplace relationship is the way that it was determined. That's why they fired him or suspended him and then mutually agreed to part ways. We'll call it that. So I looked at it as Ime's probably not going to reveal anything new, probably going to be very vague and generic and dodgy. And that's kind of what happened. He did say that the players lied when they said that they didn't know what was going on. And I think they were probably just, massaging the situation to try to get the team to maybe tell them what's the team side of the situation. But either way, we didn't really learn anything too new about what happened with the Ime situation. So I wanted to look at the evening as, how has this team moved on and how has Joe Mazzulla grown into this role, and juxtaposing that to what Ime Udoka is trying to do now in Houston, where he's kind of trying to replicate something similar to what he pulled off in Boston, but they're obviously way earlier in the process. And so Joe Mazzulla has talked a lot. He's been very honest and vulnerable this year about how much he struggled with coping with the situation he had last year, just like the craziness of how he came in. He's someone who doesn't like being in the spotlight. He likes working from behind the scenes. He doesn't want to take credit for anything. And when you're the coach, whether you want to take credit or not, you're getting blamed either way, right? And so Joe has finally found his confidence and his footing, and it's been a phenomenal year for him.
Yeah, what's been interesting with Joe Mazzulla, too, is because, last year, I don't know how much, public sentiment gets back to the coaches and things like that, but I remember one of the dominating storylines was well, it's actually Marcus Smart and Al Horford coaching this team. And, it is very dismissive of the head coach to sort of insinuate that kind of thing. But, he is kind of growing more and more into it. He does have more of a training camp. And, there is a distinctive style to which the Celtics are playing. And I think that the more important thing is they're better than they were last year. And a lot of that has to come from the coaching perspective. But I wanted to hear your perspective as to how he's done in his second year, especially tactically with the group that's been different from year one.
So I don't know where, if there was a major narrative about Horford and Smart being the real coaches. But the thing is, if you said that to Joe, he would probably say, good. I'm glad that's your perception. Because from the beginning, he talked about how he wanted it to be a partnership because he recognized the situation he was coming into. He didn't exactly have authority to really throw down the way that Ime Udoka did.
Right.
So he had to look at it as, I am completely reliant on getting buy-in from my team and making my team feel that they're empowered while also thinking that I'm creative enough and I have my finger on the pulse enough of what's happening here to be able to give them the right guidance. And so Marcus Smart and Al Horford were supposed to be major vocal parts of that team. They always were. I don't think it was that different than before. There are some stories that maybe made it seem like they had outsized power in the situation, but I think it was kind of in line generally with how things have gone in the past, especially with a team that had a very roller coaster season for as far as they got. It was like the actual ride itself was very, very up and down. So they needed those guys to lead. And, Smart's not here anymore, but now Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are more ready than ever to step in and assume that leadership role. And I think they've actually been doing a pretty good job with it. And we're so far past the whole vote of confidence for Joe thing that was happening a ton last year. I don't think that's come up once this year, because the way Missoula now carries himself and the results we're seeing of not just the fact that this team is so talented, but their game plans are really flexible night to night. They're really good at solving problems in game and making adjustments or just finding what to go to. They haven't lost multiple games in a row since I think the beginning of the year, right? I think so. Like, clearly, the stuff that you look for to show as signs of good coaching, you're seeing all of it from Boston.
Yeah.
And they have, they've had a little bit of fortune in terms of, hey, that you're running a top six here. It's probably the best top six in basketball. Now, if they had perfect health, that would be one thing. That group started together 21 times, the way they like it, with Horford coming off the bench. But they've had to use 12 different starting lineups. We'll see a lineup that we haven't gotten a look at in a little while here with Jaylen Brown out tonight. So there's been some changes that they have to navigate through. Really, the biggest criticism you can throw at Joe Mazzulla at this point is, Jeremy Renner's not that good in the town. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I know
what
it's
are you talking about?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? He's phenomenal in the town.
He's carried in that
one of the great death scenes in movie history.
That's true. That is true. So let me ask you this. Speaking of the town and how Boston everything is, the Celtics are 19-0 at home. They're 11-9 on the road. So maybe Raptors fans could feel a little solace and no Jaylen Brown tonight, and they're only quite good on the road. 19-0 at home. What do you make of that? Like, it almost feels impossible to pull that off over half a season. Like, that's half your home games for the year, basically, at an NBA level, to have it at that level night to night whenever you're at home. What do you make of that, if anything?
I mean, at home, they're as hot as my face looks on the broadcast for some reason.
Wow.
I don't know why I look like a tomato right now in the Zoom call.
You look good on our end. So.
You got way more color than both of us, which is probably
my Zoom probably look 100% red.
Yeah.
But so I think that there's probably just some scheduling luck as far as that is concerned. They've had a few games where they really dug deep and pulled it out at home, but they've also just had a lot of really comfortable wins at home. Mm-hmm. That game in Houston against Houston they just had 2 nights ago, like, Houston put up a fight for 1 quarter and then it was just a blowout from there. And they've had a lot of those games where teams are close for like a quarter or two and they just separate themselves in the second half at home. So I don't think there's anything that I can really point towards as being like, this is a way they play different on the home. At home, they've had some difficult road trips where they just like had like a back-to-back and they lost, or just stuff like that. But on their first big West Coast swing, it went really well. They lost to Golden State and then they played great from there on out. So I think that they're pretty fine on the road. It's just that the way the schedule's worked out, most of their losses have happened to come on the road.
What did you make of? So when they have a Wednesday, Thursday back-to-back last week, and one of those games is at home. The road game on the second night is against Milwaukee on national television. And look, I think if I were in the same place, obviously you're going to listen to your medical staff and find out when do you have practices and extra off days. That's going to determine some of how much you push guys on the first side of a back-to-back versus the second side of a back-to-back. But if I were in control, I'm prioritizing the home game. I want my fans to see the W. I want to get that win against the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are at the top of the table in the Western Conference, opposite Boston in the East. But then it rolls into that Thursday night, and they just like wave the white flag even before halftime, but start a different 5 and halftime. You like that strategy as like I know the Nets ate a fine for doing something kind of similar. The Celtics had the cover of being blown out in this one. Rare game to get flexed out of Thursday night basketball. What did you make of how they handled that back-to-back and the Thursday night game in particular?
I don't think they were going to sit all of their main guys. So it's not like, I don't think they're going to go into this game and be like, we're going to rest Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. They try to generally alternate those when they can. So you got to show up for that game. And that Minnesota game was a crazy game, like super physically intense, went to overtime, was a real battle down to the wire. So, they were just unlucky that they had a really difficult game the night before against a team that really has their number. Like, Minnesota's played them better than anybody else in the NBA so far this year. And so you walk into Milwaukee and you expect them to put up a fight, but they just had nothing. And that happens sometimes. I think that's way more of a schedule loss than a concern about Milwaukee. And to Mazzulla's credit, he didn't play the main guys that much. He saw this game was a wash, and he didn't try to get them out there for like that, that run into the mid fourth quarter, then put garbage time in. He was like, all right, screw it. We're moving on from this game. And sometimes you have to do that as a coach.
Yeah, in Toronto, that's known as a Nick Nurse. Yeah, it's funny too because the home record being as good as it is, like, is it almost like kind of talking about a no-hitter through like 4.5 innings right now, like 5 innings? Because I mean, the Celtics, people are unaware, they do have the 40-1 as well. Yeah, they share that one.
To their credit, they're so far into this home winning streak that we don't even ask about it anymore.
Okay.
Like for a while, they're getting to certain landmarks. We're like, okay, well, this is monumental.
Yeah.
It's crazy it's going this long. And I noticed after last game, I don't think anyone asked anything about the home winning streak.
Okay, good.
So we're over it. Everybody's over it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay.
You guys have so many things to appreciate.
Yeah. Your focus has instead been on like, let's get Derek White to the All-Star game. We need a 5th All-Star or something like that, which we could talk about after. So the home winning streak is cool. Obviously, the number 1 seed in the East, they've got like a 3-game cushion here. This is a team that's not new to this. They've been to the playoffs a ton of times, every year since 2013, 2014, and even before that was a long streak as well. They know what they're preparing for here, but this group has not won a championship together yet. What is the focus on kind of week to week right now? I'm sure it's like a vague kind of, well, let's get better and let's be playing our better basketball. But is there an area with this Celtics team where you yourself are focused on like, hey, this has got to be better by April if it's not going to be a repeat of, the last 4 years once it came playoff time?
Very little, because the way this team is playing is way more playoff ready. They're really good at the end of games now. They were really bad in fourth quarters, or really in clutch time the last few years. And they've been, I think they're like 8th or maybe even 6th in net rating right now in that. Like they've been good in the clutch. And Porzingis deserves a lot of credit for that because they just finally have 2-man game that they can go to. They can get a lot of simple stuff, just putting him and Jalen or Jason into actions, or Derek White. The Derek White, Kristaps Porzingis pick and roll has been really effective this year. Now that White is a really good pull-up shooter. So figuring out how to close games is not really a big issue for them now. Their issue is sometimes they come out flat in third quarters, like they did against Indiana, who dropped 44 on them in the third. We didn't even get to see what a third quarter against Milwaukee would look like, so but it probably would have been great. So being consistent in third quarters, that's one thing, which honestly, a lot of great teams have that, where they're up going into halftime all the time, so they come out flat in the second half. I think that's probably, you want to have your problems in the third more than you want to have them in the fourth, and that's been the opposite for them every single year. And then they had to figure out, how do we actually create offense in the fourth quarter? So really that. Jaylen Brown's playmaking has really come around over the course of the season. He was trying to be a better playmaker earlier in the year and was just a little inconsistent. And I think he's starting to do a really good job of committing to making the right reads and, kind of attacking specific coverages to pass instead of shoot late in games now. And that was something he wasn't doing as well earlier. And once that turns the corner, there's like very little for them to worry about. Like Sam Hauser needs to get back to shooting at 45% from deep, which I think it's starting to get a little bit better.
Oh, don't worry. They're playing the Raptors tonight. I believe he's shooting 600% against the Raptors.
Yeah, he's already hit a 3.
Yeah, he's sorry.
He's already 5 for 4 before we even start the game. But so like bench production being consistent and reliable, that's certainly a thing. But the starting 5, it's just like the holes are so small you can barely even thread a needle for them.
Yeah, I was gonna say the only thing the Celtics, sometimes I feel like when I'm watching, I'm like, okay, they don't play in the paint as much, maybe because they're so good at shooting threes that they can reliably hit a ton of threes. And maybe honestly, on some nights they get really cold and you might feel that impact. But I do like the fact that now they have Kristaps in the mix. And a lot of times teams will, switch and try to protect the 3-point line or at least try to guard against that dribble penetration. And the Celtics do the simple thing. They just have Porzingis against a switch. They always find him. And I feel like I've personally watched them hit like a ton of just pull-up and one jumpers of like small guys trying to reach up against this like 7'3" guy trying to contest them. What has that aspect done for the Celtics offense, being able to incorporate Kristaps?
Yeah, well, what's funny is they don't have any really low post guys. They have a lot of high and mid post guys. Yeah. So you're right. Most of their posts, they have one low post scorer on the team, and it's Drew Holiday.
He is pretty good.
Drew Holiday, he's the one guy that barrels into the paint and takes a hook shot. And then if he misses, he actually is really good at putting it back. It's kind of crazy. Huh. He basically plays like he's 6'9". They've basically been using him like Blake Griffin in 2014, essentially this year. But so we'll end up much, much lower scale. But so they post up in areas where like it's KP's shot, it is Tatum's shot. Jaylen Brown is getting better from that mid post area, but those are really inefficient areas with not great rebounding opportunities. So if they do hit a cold streak in a series from that area, or a team gets super physical in that area, matches up well, and they can't hit those shots, that's where I can see them being exposed. And then there have been times this year where they were, there's so much talk about Mazzulla ball and being too reliant on threes. I mean, they're up there in volume, but they're not like, it's not like they're an outlier in volume, right? They have better balance this year of recognizing when they're just chucking and missing a ton of threes and they need to just get some easy buckets. And they have now like the skill, they have the guys with talent to be able to do that now, which makes things easier. But there have been times this year where like literally they took 45 threes and they shot poorly. And players on the team were like, we probably should have in the third quarter started just passing up some of these decent threes and just really fight for some good mid-range or rim range. So they need to keep that in mind, especially in the postseason. But I think we've seen enough evidence at this point to presume that they're going to be just fine at that.
So it is January 15th. I wouldn't ask you this question in October or November, but we probably won't talk to you again before the trade deadline, especially since this is the fourth and final meeting between the Raptors and Celtics. The Celtics are in pretty good shape. We just kind of went over a lot of things they do well that they don't have to focus on a ton right now because they look pretty playoff ready. But as far as contenders go, they're also built pretty flexibly. They have some assets if they need to make something happen between now and the trade deadline. What level of aggression do you see them taking to the deadline, and where would you be focusing if they do, add a piece for that second unit or something like that?
Highly likely they make a deal. It's going to be small. Last year I think they traded 2 seconds for Mike Muscala, something along those lines.
He's available again. I'm sure Detroit has him now.
And I think they can trade for him now that he's been moved again, right?
Yeah.
So bring him back. They know that he's not really the kind of player that I think they need. I think they need basically somebody similar to O'Shea Brissett and Lamar Stevens, who they actually are willing to play reliably. Because right now, their ninth man tends to be a center, Luke Cornett or Nemish Queta. I don't think they're going to use a center as much in the postseason. Al Horford's just going to be the main backup big. You generally don't go to a third center. And that's where they're going to need a big, powerful wing. Sam Hauser is a good defender, and Joe Mazzulla even finally admitted, even though he's white, he's a good defender.
Is that what he said?
He did. He said, yeah, he's a white shooter, so everyone assumes he can't defend.
And then as soon as he said it, yeah, I said it. Because I think earlier this year, he wouldn't say it on the record.
Okay.
That's what it was. He's like, screw it, I'm saying it. Yeah. Hauser's a good defender, but he's not big.
Mm-hmm.
And when you need somebody that's just big, someone that you can give fouls and minutes on Giannis to, and other guys like that, they definitely need some help there. And just someone else that can finish in the paint, like you were saying before. They don't have a lot of real paint finishers. So somebody that can do some of that, I think, is probably their main target. And then Cornette and Queta have been fine this year, but ideally not the caliber you want in the playoffs. So maybe they use some of their second-round picks and that Grant Williams trade exception they have for about $6 million to get a slightly better backup center. But I think larger wing that can handle guarding superstars in the playoffs for a few minutes is probably their primary concern.
You mentioned O'Shea there. The Celtics are back tonight. These are former Raptors and Canadians. How have O'Shea and Delano been? I know Delano just kind of went down to the G League for a, hey, let's get you some minutes kind of thing. O'Shea's been in and out of the rotation as an energy piece. How have those guys been for the Celtics team?
Listen, after saying all that, I bet O'Shea's going to go out and have 14 points and 9 rebounds tonight. Everyone in Canada's going to be like, O'Shea's the truth. Why is he playing? O'Shea wasn't playing very much early in the year. Last 3-ish weeks or so, he's starting to get more rotation minutes. He's shown some good things. Energy level off the charts. He gives you a lot of what you're looking for as far as somebody that can just play above the rim, somebody that can play physically. His feel in the defensive system isn't great yet, but he also isn't really getting many reps. His shooting is very unreliable. He actually makes decent decisions with the ball. I think he should be getting more minutes really over this next month so they can figure out if he's their guy. Lamar Stevens, they just haven't really given any serious opportunity to. I think we know Lamar's game. Really rock solid defender, very basic spot up shooter on offense who can attack a little bit, and he cuts and he goes to the rack. But O'Shea is probably their best chance at getting somebody that can crack this rotation. And then Banton just hasn't really played at all. And he's given them some good hustle and defense when he's been in games, but he just hasn't really gotten much run.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the issue with Delano here in Toronto, too. It's just he's good in transition. He's good at pushing the pace. But, yeah, in terms of even as a consistent backup point guard option, the Raptors are pretty left wanting most nights.
Yeah.
No Svi? No Svi?
I kept it focused on the Canadians, but Svi Mikhailuk still exists for the Celtics as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was there was a rumor they were interested in Chris Boucher potentially as well. They're just collecting guys who didn't work on the Raptors.
They're just trying to recycle Raptor players.
Yeah, Boucher has worked, but still collecting Raptors second unit pieces.
It should be in reverse. We should be collecting Celtics.
Okay, Jared. So look, we covered Sam Hauser being white. We covered Joe Mazzulla.
All the important stories here.
We've hit pretty much everything. No Jaylen Brown tonight. With respect to tonight's game, how do you see that changing things for the Celtics? Especially, these two teams have seen each other 3 times this year, but not since the Raptors acquired RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly. That is a bit of a new look that the Celtics will see tonight.
I think this is a quickly night. Like Jalen's been really good with point of attack defense and pushing tempo on offense, and he's also been good at getting to his spots in the mid range to hit shots lately. But when Jalen isn't out there, the Celtics don't have that edge for pushing into transition that they usually have. So this is where the Raptors, they need to run. They need to run a ton. The Celtics probably won't get as many steals and easy fast breaks as the usual because they don't have Jalen out there. So that really falls, I think, into Toronto's favor. And then, when Jaylen Brown's not out there, that's a segment of the game where Tatum is off the floor, where usually Brown can give them some good buckets. And if the Raptors second unit can really pounce in those moments, and I like to see if Darko's going to actually kind of stack some more starters into those pockets of the game where Tatum's off the floor, that's where you can really chip away at the Celtics.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. By the way, quickly's breakout game was against the Celtics.
Yeah.
Like breakout in the national. Yeah. So
you better have 40 tonight.
He might need to have 40 tonight. Raptors have yet to win against an Atlantic Division opponent. I can't believe it, man. We fell very far.
Three desperate games with the Nets left to try to make that happen. Yeah.
Wow.
It's been ugly. Jared, man, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it, buddy.
It was awesome, guys. Thank you.
There you go.
Jared Weiss of The Athletic. Make sure you check out all his stuff. Look, I know we feel a certain way about the Celtics when we're talking about the Toronto Raptors, and certainly people here in Toronto, but Jared's work is excellent. And this Celtics team, if you can get past the fact that they're the Celtics, they're a fascinating team, and without argument, one of the 3 best teams in the NBA. Just a matter of, are they 1? Are they 3? Yeah. And, are they going to be able to get through the Milwaukee's, Philadelphia's, and Miami's?
Miami. I'm happy you threw Miami in there because that has been their banana peel in the conference. That's the question I wanted to ask Jared, but also I was like, he probably has to answer this 15 times a day. So I'll just ask you instead. If you're the Celtics, do you feel 100% confident going up against Philadelphia in a series, going up against Milwaukee in a series, and I suppose going up against Miami in a series?
I mean, not really, because we're talking about teams at the level where you're not going to be able to check off every possible matchup box, right? Like Philadelphia has Joel Embiid. Man, Boston Celtics got Al Horford, and he has done a great job. Right. So even if you think, well, maybe size-wise or Al Horford comes off the bench or whatever, you're still probably as okay with that as you're going to be against Joel Embiid. Milwaukee is one where I think they're probably confident with the Dame side of it, given the defensive caliber of their backcourt.
Okay.
We'll get a good look at Tatum's level of defense tonight. I'd imagine he's going to handle a lot of the Scottie Barnes assignment. If I were them, that's someone where maybe I would like one more big physical defender off the bench, even if it's just to throw a couple fouls at him.
Like a Torrey Craig.
That kind of guy, this year's version of Jay Crowder, right? Like
you can't get Jay Crowder anymore because he's on Milwaukee.
But but someone who's not actually that good, but serves a purpose.
Maybe they take PJ
like
Tucker off the Clippers' hands. He's not playing over there.
Yeah, he's got a lot of money next year too, though.
Yeah,
it's the tough part there.
That's the thing with the Celtics too. Like, it's not as easy for them to add players because they don't have not disposable. They don't have tradable contracts.
Yeah,
they need to trade away players or trade exceptions.
Trade exceptions and draft picks, which are great, but like the Grant Williams one, for example, that's a $6.2 million trade exception. But for anyone who doesn't know this, you can't combine trade exceptions with other exceptions, or you can't do, well, Peyton Pritchard makes $4 million and we have this $6 million exception, so we can take $10 million back. No. Doesn't work that way. You get a $6.2 million, you can take back $6.3 million. You get $100K of wiggle room, but that's it. So that's not getting you to a Chris Boucher.
That's the thing. They're interested in Chris Boucher. It's like, who are they even trading to get Chris?
You could get Otto Porter.
You could get Otto Porter. Do you want Otto?
The other thing you can do, you can get really creative with this, where let's say they were enamored with Boucher and they really wanted Boucher. You turn Grant Williams' $6.2 million trade exception into a player who you can then turn around and trade, and you're using the 25% in and out rules. You can kind of cobble your way there, but realistically, you're right. If anyone remembers the 2016-2017 Raptors, did all my trade deadline primers and mailbags and all your trade ideas are bad and stuff like that. That team was structured where there were a couple guys making the max. there were a whole bunch of guys making the minimum, and Patrick Patterson made $8 million.
Yep.
And every single trade scenario included Patrick Patterson because he was the only way to make anything work math-wise. The Celtics are in a bit of a spot like that where you're not trading Al Horford, Derek White, Jason Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, and then Peyton Pritchard only makes $4 million and then is heading into an extension. So he's poison pilled. And then everyone else is minimums.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you make a trade work? It really is going to have to be one of these fringier guys that you attach a pick to or something like that. It'll make for a fascinating offseason. We'll tee up the game a little more. Actually, let's just do it right now.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
It's time now for Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. Take a chance. So I mentioned it earlier. Jaylen Brown is out. He hyperextended his knee. He's not playing tonight. Jakob Poeltl remains out. Otto Porter remains out. Grady Dick is questionable with the thumb sprain. But the headline items here: Yak's out, Jaylen Brown's out. The Raptors are 7-point underdogs. The over/under is set at 242. If you don't remember, the Raptors have lost 3 times to the Celtics this year: 117-94 on the road, 108-105 here in Toronto, and 120-118 on the road. Will, Raptors +7. How you feeling?
I never feel good playing against the Celtics. I'm sorry, I just don't.
This is true. I know Alex would tease you sometimes that if they went every game the way you predicted, they'd go 82-0. They'd actually go 78-4.
Yeah. By the way, I already apologized on Friday's recap, but sorry for picking the Raptors against the Jazz. They blew that one by 30+ points.
Never apologize for being yourself, Will.
Yeah. Look, listen, I'm going to be very realistic. I never like when the Raptors play the Celtics. I feel like the Celtics have had the Raptors number consistently now. I'm not saying the Raptors can't compete with them. The last time the Celtics were in Toronto, the Raptors competed with them. Pascal had a really good fourth quarter, and it came down to that one last possession. I think Dennis Schroeder went for a little running push shot.
That was the game they couldn't get Scottie back in the game.
If anyone get Scottie back in the game, yeah. I mean, everyone's learning on the job apparently, but in any case, it's just a bad matchup. Yes, Jaylen Brown not being available is gonna help favor the Raptors, I suppose, but the Celtics are just really, really balanced. I think in this case, starting a little bit smaller probably will give the Raptors an initial advantage, just because I feel like it was really awkward seeing the Raptors play the Celtics with Jakob Poeltl in the lineup. They're so good at spacing the floor, even from the center positions, that it's always felt a little awkward. However, when you're telling me the alternative is the Raptors might probably start Thad Young, are we starting Thad Young again?
Maybe.
Okay, so Jonte?
I think I'd be more comfortable with Thad in this matchup.
So
Jonte chasing Kristaps on pick and pops could be tough.
Yeah, so that's my thing. It's just it's still not ideal. But I mean, look,
honestly,
the Raptors can compete with them, but I don't expect them to win tonight.
This is a night you could probably justify starting small. Like Scottie's the center, Pascal's the 4, and you get an extra, whether it's Gary or Dennis in there. Just because Porzingis is obviously very, very good, and he could take guys into the post, but they run so much pick and pop stuff with him. They want him on the perimeter facing up. Yeah. They'll kind of invert things where, like Jared mentioned, it's Drew Holiday actually in the post. Everyone else is high post.
They're probably going to be posting guys like Gary and Dennis if we do that.
Yeah, but do you prefer that to a Thad Young or Jonte Porter trying to chase pick and pops against the team that shoots the most threes?
Honestly, I feel like offensively the Raptors are so used to playing with a high post hub, passing hub, that I do think that Thad will provide some value there. But I'll give him the first look, and then you can adjust on the fly. This is one of those games similar to a lot that the Raptors have had this year, where they might start a game with one way, but then third quarter might look a different way coming out at halftime.
So Jaylen Brown's missed 2 games this year. There was one game against Philadelphia where Porzingis was also out. So they actually beat the 76ers in that game. Al Horford came in to be the replacement. Yeah. The other game Jaylen Brown missed, they started Sam Hauser. So that is probably what I'm expecting tonight. I know that on personnel alone, you'd probably expect Al Horford to get bumped in and then they play a little bigger or whatever. But given what the Raptors do well and don't do well, and given how much Boston likes this stability of the rotation, I kind of think Sam Hauser starts.
He probably starts. I mean, he started last time the Raptors played them shorthanded.
Yeah.
And I suppose he's been on a cold shooting streak. But
yeah, what's he down to? 41.3% on threes on the year? Ice cold.
Yeah, he's in the last 14 games down to 32% in those last 14 games. But I fully expect him to hit at least 4 threes against the Raptors.
This is the thing with with picking the sample sizes is that was what, the last 14 games?
That's 14 games, yeah.
The last 8 games he's at 42%.
Exactly.
So that streak seems behind him at this point. He did have a bad game against Houston on the weekend, but it didn't really matter.
I hate being this positive about the Celtics, but I just got to give respect where it's due, man.
They're good, man.
Yeah.
It's really, really unfortunate. You want to take a break and do some around the NBA?
Yeah, that was Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. Take a chance, probably on the Boston Celtics. Okay, we're going to take our last break. I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wim Lou. We're joined by co-host Blake Murphy. We are going to go around the NBA. That's right, no Alex, but we can still go around the NBA. It's fine. And before we do that, though, there was a segment that we actually ran out of time in segment 1, which always happens. Like, we always prepare all these topics, and we're like, oh, is it going to be enough? Is it going to be up? It's always way too much. And we're like an overpacker, essentially, for a trip when it comes to preparing for the show. And one subject I didn't really get to in segment 1, but I wanted to circle back before we go around the NBA, is the fact that, we've seen now in 2 of the 7 games that the Raptors have played that Darko has chosen not to go back to RJ Barrett in the fourth quarter.
And this time in the third quarter.
In this time, it was the third quarter. So the previous time was Sacramento. That game, he was struggling. He didn't end up featuring in the fourth quarter. Chris Boucher was playing really well in that one. And then in this last game against Utah, I mean, RJ was it was a pretty tough performance. I think it was 0 for 7 for 0 points in the first half. And he had some foul trouble, and so Darko decided to change the starting lineup. He brought in Gary to start the third quarter. He brought in Jonte to start for Thad. Now, Jonte started for Thad, whatever. I mean, obviously, it's a bit of a triage situation right now without Jakob available. But what do you make of the fact that RJ's role with the starting 5 seems to be maybe the most fungible out of the 5 players so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes some sense. Like, when we were coming into what this would all look like after the trade, RJ obviously has the name and the reputation, the draft cash, and even the Canadian aspect. But based on what he did in New York, you could have made a case for someone else to start. I wouldn't have made that case. I would have gone with RJ, but I would have heard your argument if you didn't think he was a lock to start with this team. So I think that's part of it. I think it's good to get back to some flexibility in that regard, where they were just like, because they didn't have the bodies, they were just so rigid for so much of this year. It was the same starting 5 no matter what. We had to talk about it 25 shows in a row before Dennis moved to the bench and Gary came in, and that obviously, was something different, but it wasn't particularly effective either. So I think that, it's good to get back to some of that level of flexibility. I think RJ is also a unique case in that if Emmanuel Quickly doesn't have it that night, he's still bringing some things, right? The spacing he provides as a shooting threat, his team level off ball defense and things like that. On a night that RJ doesn't have it, it's a little tougher for him to contribute because he's not that same level of individual defender. He's not a natural playmaker, at least not in a kind of lead guard role. And teams don't really care that much about RJ spotting up. So when RJ's at his best, he turns all of those things and uses them against a defense really, really well. When he doesn't have it, though, it can kind of cramp your spacing. It's kind of a, what are you adding? And on a team right now that could probably justify when Jakob's back, there are probably 7 guys on a good night who could say, hey, I should be on the floor at the end of a game. Someone's gonna have to come out, and RJ probably has, of those main 7 guys, other than Gary, probably the lowest floor. And Gary at least offers some spacing. He's just, not defensively. There's not a lot there. So his floor to me is lower. But RJ, despite the upside we've seen, probably has the second lowest floor of that group of 7.
Totally different group of 7 that we're talking about here.
Yeah. No, sorry about the art lovers.
It's all good. But I think for RJ, I mean, it's a little surprising to me. Like, okay, I hear you with the floor and all that kind of stuff, but long-term wise, in terms of who's for sure going to be here next year and beyond, like RJ is no lower than 3rd on this list on the Raptors. Yep. So in terms of like core going forward, I mean, I think his body of work is good enough where I wouldn't try to move him in and out of the starting lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not advocating for him not starting tonight or anything like that. Yeah. It's just, on a night where so little was working against Utah and he was really, really bad. I get it is all. I would stick with this starting 5 for at least a while here, because you're right. 3 of the pieces are, the pieces.
And I guess the context here is we've seen Darko do this elsewhere as well. So, the most notable lineup decision he's made is after about 30 games of it not working out, he moved Dennis to the second unit. And of course, trades and stuff like that happen, injuries, and so he did start a couple more games. But generally speaking, he's now been moved to the second unit, and he's a 6-man type. That took a long time for him to get to that spot, though. We've seen Jakob start every game when he's available, but there were stretches where he would not play for the fourth quarter, or even that he would not start for the second half, I believe, once in a while. So, but that took until at least 20-ish games of it not working for that to, start to pop up or be a regular occurrence. The fact that RJ, after 2 weeks, and objectively, he's had at least 5 good games, I feel like. The 2 games that he didn't have good games, those were the ones where Darko limited his minutes. To me, I'm just give him a little more rope, especially with the new team and everything like that. I do believe in the upside of what RJ has been bringing, and I want him to play through those mistakes. This is sort of my thinking with this, but I'm just a little surprised that Darko's already arrived at this point that quickly.
Sure, I guess I just one, I understand a little bit, and 2, they were getting absolutely hammered by the Jazz, and they had to try something. They also flipped Thad Young out for Jonte Porter.
Yeah, I think it's also important to say that RJ was asked about this after the game, and he was like, dude, I sucked. It's not something that I'm going to push back against at all. He was totally professional about the whole thing. So it's not I'm not trying to create a problem. I'm just thinking that I would personally give RJ more opportunity to try to play through his struggles. That's all.
Yeah, I think that that's fair, and I think that's what you'll see more often than not, honestly.
All right. Okay, around the NBA, we'll see if we'll see what happens with RJ moving forward. But I do believe, agree with you there that he's going to get every opportunity to continue to start and keep playing. So around the NBA, first thing over the weekend, the Pistons and the Wizards made a trade and sent everyone scrambling to their phones, only to find out that the Detroit Pistons had traded Marvin Bagley III and Isaiah Livers and 2 future second-round picks to the Washington Wizards for Danilo Gallinari and Mike Muscala, the team announced Sunday. Blake, your thoughts about this trade? Because honestly, this, I guess the old phrase is it's not really worth the ink it's printed on.
Yeah.
But the news isn't worth that. But, I mean, in this case, the digital ink that Woj had to input into his phone.
Yeah. So, I mean, this one's curious to me for a couple of reasons. The main reason for this trade is the Pistons wanted out of the $12.5 million they owe to Marvin Bagley for next year. They pick up 2 expirings. Isaiah Livers has been the worst player in the NBA statistically. I would still give the nod to James Wiseman myself, but based on advanced
competition on the same team.
Based on the advanced metrics and things like that, Livers has a claim at that. And then the second round picks here are so funny, where one of those picks is only if it's the lesser of 3 different picks, and only if it's within a certain range in the second round in 2025.
Okay. So
it's one
a
of those
pick.
It's the 2026 one's a real pick. The 2025 one's kind of a fake pick. What I found fascinating about this trade, though, is we're a couple weeks out from the trade deadline. Detroit and Washington are both teams that should be opportunistic at the trade deadline, whether it's eating a salary, whether it's facilitating a larger trade with their cap space or their cap flexibility or another salary and things like that. And I do think that even if you understand this trade on its surface, Washington picks up a pick, they get a look at Bagley, Detroit gets out of the money. That much I get. This trade absolutely would have been there at February 8th at 2:59 p.m.
Yeah.
To do this now Gallinari and Muscala as expirings who are vets who could maybe give you some minutes, they can't be added with someone else in a trade.
So you can trade for them individually, but just not
exactly
as a group. Okay, cool.
Marvin Bagley's $12.5 million, which would be, if you're looking at, look at how complicated some of the Pascal 3-teamers can get, or DeJounte Murray 3-teamers. Detroit had a possibility of, if you just sit and wait, Marvin Bagley's $12.5 million contract, maybe you get out of it for free because you ask that as a favor of we're going to cap-wise help this trade make sense. And we don't even want anything back, but we're not giving up second-round picks to get out of that salary. If you're Washington, that use of your 2024, 2025 cap space, what if a better player than Marvin Bagley at $12.5 million came along between now and February 8th? It's just, to me, it shows 2 front offices that were, I get it, they're itchy to do something. I think for Detroit, there's probably an element of Bagley's unhappy there. Let's get him out of the room. Let's get 2 vets who could maybe help us actually win a game. But to me, it's two front offices that have not done a very good job jumping a couple weeks early on a trade that would be there at 2:59 on the deadline and taking themselves out of the mix for, if you're Washington, well, maybe Gallo or Muscala could be of value. Maybe we could pick up second-round picks without having to eat Bagley's money. If you're Detroit, we've had to pay to get rid of Bagley earlier than necessary when maybe we wouldn't have had to if we just waited a little bit. It just, I don't know. It seems to me, as much as it's a nothing deal, I actually think less of both front offices after doing it.
It's bad process is what you're saying.
Yeah, and why right now? This absolutely was there a couple weeks from now.
I know Woj's pissed. He's like, man, you want to do this? I gotta get on my phone and do this right now and tweet it out before Shams does it 10 seconds later.
Yeah, like Alex made the joke on Twitter that like this is like the two last place guys in your fantasy league making a trade. I made the joke of like you're at a poker game and there's no buybacks and a second table starts up. That's what Detroit and Washington are doing over here.
Yikes.
It's a mess. Obviously, there's almost no basketball impact to this. Who cares? But yeah, bad process.
It's just also funny for the players involved because, like, let's say you're Marvin Bagley and you've been stuck on bad franchises. Of course, this Pistons team, and you find out you get traded, and then you find out that it's to the Washington. It's like if like Andy Dufresne at the end of Shawshank Redemption climbs out of that hole and he finds out he like escaped to Rikers. Like he's just still in prison. Like that, you have not moved to a better situation for any of the four players involved in this deal.
Duck your way to Rikers is
it's tough, man.
By the way, I know we joked about it with Jared, but while we're doing around the NBA, what did you think of Mike Brown bringing out the laptop? So for anyone who didn't see it, Mike Brown, coach of the Kings, was getting into it with the officials. He is going to become the fourth coach this year to get fined for talking about the officials. But he actually brought a laptop out and went like this and like showed the media the plays that he was talking about. Obviously this is silly, but what did you make of that? You like that?
I like that. I really like Mike Brown as a character.
Yeah.
Like he just seems like a guy that I would genuinely like to have as my boss. He seems really personable. He seems like he's got a lot of great experience. He's coached obviously LeBron famously, but lots of superstars in his time. He's been around a long time. He wears Vans. The whole Kings staff wears Vans. I get a kick out of that. And
I'm still waiting for the first hooper to hoop in Vans. I've told you this story before where Ronald Roberts Jr., the 905 guy, is a big skateboarder, and he told me at one point he wanted to be the first NBA player with a Vans deal. We need it. If pitchers in baseball can do it,
you
throw a no-hitter in Vans, we can get a guy hooping in a Nike SBs or something.
This guy trying to see Van Stevenson, but like
wow.
I like Mike Brown a lot, man, as a character, as a personality. So
and shout out to Jordy Fernandez on that stuff.
For sure. It's great to just bring, like more and more like pieces of evidence. Because it's easy to just be like, you're at the podium, you do nothing. Like it's actually kind of funny because you really just see players and coaches come to the podium and they just speak. Right. To have visual aid, like now we're opening up a new door. Like I think coaches should do this more and more often.
Yeah. Whoever gets post game podium tonight, if they win, I want show and tell. Bring something. Yeah. Let's forget the game. Be like the podcast. Be like us. Like come to the microphone with a laptop in front of you and like demonstrate. The best we get is a guy looking at the box score, be like, oh, how many assists did I have?
No, but even the box score is cool. I love when they like rip it up or like they toss it like Jimmy Butler.
Just don't tell Rudy Gay when he outlawed the stats sheet for this is maybe before you were covering the team, but when Rudy Gay was still a Raptor,
I remember.
You weren't allowed to have the stats sheet in the locker room.
Well, no one should be able to looking at 11 for 37 in the box score ever from one player. But yeah.
All right.
I'm not forgiving Rudy Gay for that. I'm sorry, man. 11 for 37 in an overtime game against the Houston Rockets, and they only scored like in the 80s.
Yeah.
It's like 2 overtimes, and they scored 80-something points.
Speaking of guys you'll never forget, or never forgive, rather. Kawhi signed the extension with the Clippers on the weekend. So obviously Steve Ballmer willing to go way into the second apron. Like he's going to Paul George will get extended. James Harden will probably get re-signed, whatever. Clippers are also getting the 2026 All-Star game. This to me is the Clippers are obviously putting a lot of money into a new arena, a new facility, and to their team. You like that as a like should the league make more of an effort to, hey, there's a new stadium. There's something different and new. Let's try to get the focus on that with the All-Star game.
I mean, I like it. Like it's obviously a way to introduce and create like more hype. I also think that like I don't know what the league was doing the last couple of years, but for the All-Star games to be in Utah.
Was it Cleveland, Utah, Indy in this
Cleveland, Utah, Indy has been the last 3 All-Stars. Like I appreciate smaller markets getting it. I really liked it when the Raptors got it. And I don't think Toronto's a small market. It's just priority-wise. They're clearly a small market. But, like, come on, man. Like, the All-Star game should be in places like New Orleans, like LA, like Phoenix, like Vegas. You know what I mean? Like fun, warm times in the summer that like not just players want to go to, but the fans want to travel to go to.
Low of -16 Celsius in Toronto this week. You trying to run back the coldest weekend of all time in Toronto for All-Star, like in 2016?
It is feeling that way. But even when it was in Toronto and it was like ungodly how cold it was, they still had like the hottest ticket in town when it was like Kobe's last All-Star game, when it was
Drake coaching the celebrity game.
Drake coaching the celebrity game, Draymond Green and Kevin Hart having a 3-point shooting contest, which low-key Kevin Hart kind of won. You also had Steph Curry going against Klay Thompson, going against Devin Booker in the finalists of the 3-point shootout. And then, of course, you had like the best dunk contest, arguably of all time, but like maybe you don't want to say it of all time, but the dunk off between Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon was just ridiculous. Like everyone remembers that All-Star
Easily
weekend.
the best since Vince.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so
if you want to quibble beyond that, whatever.
So exactly, it's like anyway, I'm happy that LA's the All-Star game's been in LA because there's a chance us media we get to go to that potentially. And,
You weren't asking Tolman for the tickets to Indy?
I did not request tickets to go to Indianapolis, although that court in the middle of the
airport.
The airport looked pretty cool.
That does look really. I saw someone tweet you. Imagine on your layover, you blow your Achilles. That's rough.
The other thing was, imagine someone yelled "open shooter" in an airport. That
wow, wow, yikes. Okay,
Sam Hauser's over there.
Quick pivot.
FBI's gonna be on you, man.
Draymond back tonight.
Yes.
After missing 16 games. He'll go against the Grizzlies team that, by the way, in addition to John Morant and Marcus Smart and Brandon Clark and Steven Adams, is now without Desmond Bane for 6 weeks. What are you looking for in the Draymond return? Do you care much about the basketball side and the Warriors side? Or are you just like kind of waiting to see who pushes his buttons first?
No. Of course, I'm going to respect him like seriously as a basketball player, even though I feel like a lot of this year he hasn't respected himself seriously as a basketball player. But like we mentioned earlier, like the Raptors since the trade, last 7 games, they're 28th in defense. Detroit's 29th. Golden State's 30th. Like at minimum, Draymond comes back in and helps him with the defensive element. And yeah, I mean, we'll see. This is probably really difficult to salvage. We'll even see if he has a long-term future. I know that when a friend of the program, Andy Liu, came on, he kind of even speculated that Draymond might have played for this last game for Golden State. So
Draymond on his podcast said he was like really considering retiring, and Adam Silver kind of talked him out of it.
Also, is that Adam Silver's role to come in and tell people not to retire? Like Adam Silver, man, maybe chill a little bit. But
Adam Silver didn't want to deal with the cap headaches of like, how do we treat this salary cap wise? Like a guy choking people out enough that he's retiring.
He's like, you're giving the league so much money with your fines that I actually don't want you to leave.
That's a revenue source. It's driving the cap higher by the clawback on Draymond's. By the way, Golden State 18-21, a game out of even the play-in right now. So this is a huge one for a huge one and a huge couple of ones coming up for them.
Look, everyone knows I'm a bit in the tank for the Warriors anyway, but just like I mean, come back, play professional basketball, and even help Steph a little bit because Steph has had some really up and down performances too. And I do feel like his 2-man game with Draymond is like a huge part of what gets him going too. So I'm just excited to see if if he's going to play like non-punchy basketball and then B, like just come back and help the Warriors. So.
A good piece on Draymond's return by Kendra Andrews up at ESPN.com, by the way.
I'm going to check that out. Okay. Well, that does it for us today. I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure to find The Raptors Show where you listen to podcasts and subscribe. And please rate and review the show. Thanks once again to producer Mark Boffo, Blake Murphy, our board producer Dare Brendale, Jennifer Olnick, David Sis, Jared Manitai for helping us behind the scenes, Jared Weiss for joining us on the program. And we'll be back to talk to you tomorrow. Oh, and Louis Zatzman. Sorry.